Let me take this opportunity to introduce to all of you the eminent moderators and the speaker of today's program. Dr. Saurav Sinha is an executive director at BBI Foundation, Kolkata. He has been exclusive VR practice for the last 20 years. He was a consultant at Shankar Nethralaya, Chennai, and then the medical director at SN Kolkata. He has delivered more than 250 talks at international and national meetings. Dr. Saurav Sinha is one of the moderators of today's program. Dr. Satyajit Sinha, a renowned cataract and glaucoma surgeon, is the director of ABI Institute, Patna. Presently, he is academic and research committee member East of AIOS. He is recipient of several prestigious awards. He has been invited as guest faculty at numerous national and state conferences since 2005. He has been chief instructor and co-instructor for international, national and state conferences since 2001. Dr. Satyajit Sinha is also one of the moderators of today's program. Dr. Pooja Sinha is a senior vitreoretinal consultant at ABI Institute, Patna. She did her vitreoretinal fellowship from Shankar Nethralaya, Chennai. Earlier, she was attached with vitreoretinal department of Stanford University, USA, and Oxford Radcliffe Hospital, Hull Royal Infirmary, UK. She served as chief instructor for instruction course on indirect ophthalmoscopy at AIOS, DOS, and SARC meets. Awarded with Dr. D.K. Bose Gold Medal for Best Paper Presentation and Appreciation Award for her work from national and international a senior VR consultant at BBI Foundation, Kolkata, did his fellowship in Shankar Nethralaya, Chennai, recipient of the prestigious Dr. B.K. Mitra. He has several international and national index journal publications to his credit. He is the eminent speaker of today's program. Now, may I request Dr. of today's proceeding.
Am I audible? Okay, so good evening, dear postgraduates. Welcome to this very interactive webinar on comprehensive ophthalmology by ABI Institute, Patna. This webinar is specially designed to keep postgraduate trainings and syllabus in mind. It is detailed and spread over 2 to 3 months with all topics ranging from anterior to posterior segment. Most of the webinars going on pan-India at the moment aim at having consultants as their target audience. So this is the webinar with the difference. And this webinar will be basic. At the same time, we aim to have it exhaustive. At the end of each webinar, postgraduates are free to ask questions. Last week, we had Dr. Love Kochgave speaking on squint. This week and the week following next week will be purely retina. My co-moderator, Dr. Saurav Sinha, Head of Retinal Services at BBI Foundation and the Director at BBI Foundation and former consultant and my teacher at Shankar Nethralaya, Chennai, has worked very hard at designing the retina capsule for this webinar. Now, without much delay, I would request the next speaker to take over and introduce the first speaker for this day. Over to you, please.
Dr. Saurav Sinha.
I think we just start with there are lovely questions coming along. There's a question which says, please, what are the congenital anomalies related to vitreous and retina? I think it's a brilliant question. I invite my very good friend and partner and colleague and Dr. Krishna Nandi, who is an eminent speaker, to kindly go ahead with this thing. We will take questions as we go along. Dr. Krishna, do kindly start your talk, please.
Is my screen is visible?
Absolutely fine, sir. We can see your slide very well.
Okay. So at this outset, I'd like to thank ABI Eye Institute, Patna, and Dr. Satyajit Sinha, Dr. Saurabh Sinha, and Interns Pharmaceutical, who having me here for this talk. Talk in front of the budding ophthalmologist of India, basically from Bihar, West Bengal. So my topic will be applied anatomy of retina vitreous. So at the end of my talk or in between my talk, I can happy to answer your questions. So I'll be talking about the retinal anatomy first. First, the embryology of the retina. Retina actually derived from the outer and inner walls of the embryological optic cup, and it has two primary layers: outer neuroectoderm and inner neuroectoderm. From the outer neuroectoderm, it develops to retinal pigment epithelium, which is a thin layer, outer layer, and the inner neuroectoderm gives rise to sensory retina, which has multiple layers. So this is embryology in short. This is the embryological diagram from which the eye has developed neuroectoderm. So this is the gross anatomy of the retina. If you can see, the periphery of the retina is bounded by ora serrata, and at the center there is a macula, that's the most sensitive part of our eye, and there is a just beside the macula there is an optic disc from which the blood vessels arises and supplies the retina. So landmark of the retina can be divided as optic disc, macula lutea, and peripheral retina. The optic disc is a pale pink, well-defined area with a diameter of 1.5 millimeter. All retinal layers terminate except nerve fiber layer, which continues to the optic nerve, and physiological curve depression is there in the optic disc. Macula lutea is a 5.5 millimeter in diameter. The center is fovea centralis, is the central depressed part of the macula. Foveola forms the central floor of the fovea, and umbo is the tiny depression at the center of the fovea. This is actually the measurement of the first, that's the foveal avascular zone, which is 0.5 millimeter. There is a 500 micron. Fovea is 1.5 millimeter, and macula altogether 5.5 millimeter. So the peripheral part, if you can see the schematic diagram where these four things are the vortex vein. These are arbitrary line. If I join the vortex vein arbitrarily, it denotes the equator, and beyond the equator is the peripheral part of the retina, and posterior to the equator is the posterior part of the retina. Now these are the retinal layer often asked in the examination. There are 10 layers of the retina from outside inwards: retinal pigment epithelium, layers of rods and cones, external limiting membrane, outer nuclear, outer plexiform, inner nuclear, inner plexiform, ganglion cell, nerve fiber layer, internal limiting membrane. So these are the 10 layers of the retina. So coming one by one, the retinal pigment epithelium is the most active cell in our body. Per se, it firmly adherent to the Bruch's membrane and the rods and cones. It's mainly help in integrity of the subretinal space and forms the outer blood retinal barrier. And it has several functions like pigment function, it renewal and support the photoreceptor, has evident in life adaptation and screening. Metabolic function, like it forms the outer blood retinal barrier. Dehydration keeps the subretinal space dehydrated. It has photoreceptor phagocytotic action, pigment cycle, electrical activity, like it forms the C wave, and repair and regeneration. Now coming to the next step, the rods and cones, photoreceptors, they are tightly have the visual pigment in them. They are helpful in vision, light vision. So actually we have 120 million rods in our eyes and 6.5 million cones in our eyes. So why they are named as rods and cones? Because see, the terminal part of the rod is a cylindrical shape. That is why they are named as rod. If you see the cone, this is a conical shape. So that is why they are named as cone. But this cone, conical shape of the cone is no longer present in the fovea. These are also cylinder shape at the foveal area. The external limiting membrane is a firm junction between the cell membrane of the photoreceptor and the Muller cell. Just inside the photoreceptor is the external limiting membrane. It's not actually true membrane. It's actually the connection between the photoreceptor and the external limiting membrane. Now comes the outer nuclear layer. These are the outer nuclear body of the rods and cones. These lie as a single layer next to the external limiting membrane. The foveal region more abundant at the cone, and peripherally the rods are there. Is around 550 micron in thickness. Then comes the outer plexiform layer, also known as the Henle's layer. Why? Because it's oblique orientation of the photoreceptor action in this layer, where the cone in the periphery is oriented vertical. So it gives the space for the accumulation of fluid in this layer at the fovea, that is cause of the cystoid macular edema. So it is the orientation of the action of the cone that gives rise to the Henle's layer. And the junction of the photoreceptor and the bipolar cell mainly forms the outer plexiform layer. Inner nuclear layer, it has several nucleus like bipolar cell, the first order neuron, helps in dark and light response. Horizontal cells, it is a negative feedback to photoreceptor. Amacrine cells is an inhibitory neuron, helps in circadian rhythm. Mueller cells, actually the support cell, it supports the cell structure and function, and it has the capillary of the retinal vessels. There are a lot of types of bipolar cell theoretically important. Most important function of the bipolar cell is light response on bipolar and on off bipolar. So it's in during the light response it gets on and off in light exposure. So it helps in light vision. Now next comes the layer of inner plexiform layer. It consists of synapse between the action of bipolar cell and ganglion cell, and it is actually absent in the foveola. So ganglion cell is the next layer. The cell body is this is the second order neuron, and there are a lot of types of ganglion cell like WXY ganglion cell. W helps in movement to see the movement. X helpful in color vision, and Y helpful in light intensity. P and M ganglion cell. This P is parvocellular, M is magnocellular, depending upon where it is projected in the lateral geniculate body. And there is the on-center and off-center ganglion cell. It's also helpful in light response, monosynaptic and polysynaptic ganglion cells. Next is the nerve fibrillary. This consists of myelinated actions of the ganglion cell. It is thickest superiorly and thinnest at the temporal part of the disc. Next, the nerve fiber layer. Nerve fiber layer is thickest superiorly, and if you can see this schematic diagram is very thin temporal to the disc. In internal limiting membrane, it is a pass positive 2 membrane. It actually consists of 4 elements: collagen fibril, proteoglycan, basement membrane, and plasma membrane of the Mueller cell. It's actually the foot plates of the Mueller cell joined to form the internal limiting membrane. Now, if you see the structure of the fovea, is actually the structures of the fovea formed by the cone itself. Other layers are pushed aside so that the main structure in the foveola is the cone cell, and other structures are pushed aside. The blood supply mainly it supplies by the short ciliary arteries and the central artery of the retina. If you see this diagram, the outer part of the retina usually supplied by the diffusion from the choriocapillaries, like short posterior ciliary arteries and long posterior ciliary arteries. But the inner part of the retina gets supplied from the central retinal artery. It has few plexuses, like superior capillary plexus, intermediate plexus, and deep capillary plexus. So it extends from the nerve fiber layer to the outer plexiform layer. The superficial plexus is found in the nerve fiber, ganglion cell, and inner plexiform layer. Deep capillary plexus lies in the inner nuclear layer and outer plexiform layer. See, if you can see this is a diabetic patient fundus picture. If you can see there's a flame-shaped hemorrhage. Actually, the flame-shaped hemorrhage is there at the nerve fiber layer. So that is why it is flame-shaped. If you see the dot plot hemorrhage, it actually occupies at the layer of outer plexiform layer. So this is how the hemorrhage name comes, and their shape comes like that. Now, there are cellular origin of ERG. The ERG waves come from different layers of the retina. Like A wave comes from the photoreceptor, B wave comes from the bipolar cell and molar cell, C wave comes from the pigment epithelium, D wave from the off bipolar cell. The oscillatory potentially actually formed by the amacrine cell. Now, what is the retinal function? Main function is the vision, the transduction, that is the rhodopsin activation, retinal integration, horizontal bipolar cell interaction, on and off pathways. There are different pathways in the retina, helps in adaptation, color vision, electrical response like ELD. These are the functions of the retina. This is the visual pathway. If you can see the photoreceptor, then the bipolar cell, then the ganglion cell. The visual function, there is a non-image forming function and image forming function. I'm not going to details of that. It helps in circadian rhythm, pupillary light reflex, light perception, image formation. Now, before going to retinal degeneration, there are a lot of congenital questions. If anybody can ask me any question, I am happy to answer before going to vitreous part of it.
Dr. Krishnendu, Dr. Sinha here.
Yes.
So I am at the outset. I will take Pooja's and Dr. Saty's permission to thank Dr. Krishnendu. This is an extremely dry and boring topic, an extremely difficult topic to talk about, and I know for the students also this is not something that's really exciting. But Pooja, I will just ask a few questions and I will take your feedback also, and Krishnendu's also. I just made a few notes here. Dr. Krishnendu, how long will you take to do your vitreous topic? How long will you speak there approximately?
5 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes.
10 minutes. So we are in time. Dr. Satyajit, I hope you are in time.
Yes, we have the time. Yes.
Okay. So Dr. Krishnendu, for just to make things simpler, can we please go back to your first slide? Because you said you spoke so many things, and I think all of them are important from the exam point of view, from the knowledge point of view, and to correlate with the clinical diseases. I think all this is very important. Now I will quickly just make a few. You can just give a few small answers because this is not for the VR fellow. This is for the PG. Embryologically, you said this, that. I have forgotten most of this. My question to you is that if in some, we will ask somebody on a later class to show a choroidal coloboma, but congenitally a choroidal coloboma is an embryological mishap. So can you just tell us in a few words how does it occur, a coloboma of the retina and choroid?
Yeah, it's it's delayed fusion or non-fusion of the embryogenic fissure. The embryological fissure actually fuses to each other. So if it doesn't fuses to each other, it causes formation of the choroidal coloboma. Naturally, it happens in the intranasal area. It fuses at the intranasal area, but sometimes due to rotation of the embryonic fissure, it can happen to the supratemporal area, infratemporal area, anywhere. But generally, the embryonic fissure fuses at the intranasal area. So if it doesn't fuses to each other, it gives rise to coloboma of the choroid and retina.
And this way, sometimes we involved with the lens coloboma also and an iris coloboma also. So I think for the students to understand that when you see a moment, you see on the slit lamp an iris coloboma, then look for the lens coloboma dilatation, then dilate and see the fundus. There is a chance that you might see a coloboma of the choroid and retina inside also.
Yes.
Can we just move your slides? This is very difficult for me. Satyajit, please
There's
go.
a question
Yes.
also.
Sir, why is choroidal coloboma commonly associated with iris coloboma? That's exactly the point what Dr. Krishnendu said, because this is an embryogenic. While the baby is being formed inside the the ocular structures, the coats don't form, so it can have different variations. You have only the iris coloboma, you can have with lens, or you can have with the choroidal coloboma, or it may be isolated also. They may not be there. It depends on where, when the baby was formed, when the baby was born, where the fusion had stopped based on that. Dr. Krishnendu, can we go back to slides, please?
Yeah. Yeah. One second.
I would request that for the postgraduate students to keep posting your questions. I will keep seeing them. I had missed that. Sorry. But a couple, thank you. Can you go back to your slides,
Yes.
Krishnendu, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can we go to the previous slide? Can you go to the previous slide, please? Dr. Nandi?
Which one? Which one you want?
Well, the optic disc size is also shown. Next, sorry. Next.
This one?
No, the optic disc size is shown. I think there's a lag phase between what you show us and what we see.
This one?
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Now next. Next. Next slide. Yeah, we'll stop here. Dr. Nandi, no, previous one. Go slow. The slide which shows all the measurements. Because this is slide. This slide is very important because to understand the size of things, to understand the correlation of things, it's very important to know these numbers well. The optic disc size, which Dr. Satyajit measures all the time, and the fovea size 1.5 millimeters. Dr. Krishnendu, with your pointer, can you just show both those sizes, please? With your pointer,
Yeah, this is the
with
optic
your
disc.
mouse. Yeah. Which
And
is
this is
how
the,
long? Vertical diameter?
it is around 1.5. It is around 1.5. Both are similar.
Exactly. So this is the point I'm trying to make. The fovea that we show over there is 1.5 millimeters also, and the disc also 1.5 millimeters also. Now, foveola is the area right in the middle, and what we are concerned about is this foveal avascular zone. We as clinicians on the fluorescein angiography look at the foveal avascular zone integrity. So this, when you are looking at a patient of diabetic maculopathy, we have done fluorescein angiography, or we're looking at a patient of venous occlusion, we want to see what has happened over there. Please understand the words posterior pole, macula, fovea are sometimes used very overlapping, but we must understand that they are all exactly detailed. Like the macular, he showed 5.5 meters outermost circle. Dr. Krishnan, can you show the outermost circle? Yeah, that whole area is macula. So we say macular degeneration, and that may be only the fovea area. So it's nice to know what is the definition of macula is 5.5 millimeters, fovea is 1.5 millimeters only, and the central area foveola is, clinically, we never mention foveola. Even though a lot of us write FR dull. I think those days are gone by now. FR dull is no longer a word we should be using. We should be more descriptive in what we are writing. Anything you want to add, Pooja, to this clinical part of it?
I think this is a very valid point because a lot of the disease pathologies and their prognosis depends on the status of the fovea. So if we know the different demarcations, I think it will be very beneficial for us to understand the disease pathology.
It's on my phone. Okay. Can we go ahead, Krishnendu, please? Yeah. Krishnendu, can we go ahead, please?
Yes, I have gone ahead.
Yeah, this is lag period. I'm sorry.
Mute your.
Yeah, he's muted. So now, can you show those that circle with your point of the vortex veins? With your pointer, Dr. Krishnan, can you show that circle? Yeah. See, these vortex veins are not the way this photograph shows nicely. 4 spiders over there. When you look at the fundus, you really can't see them so easily. Take my word for it. You look at the fundus very carefully. You can't see those nice spiders. You will not find them over there. But please understand that is where the equator is for us. And the part, can you show the anterior retina, Krishnendu sir? The part between the ora serrata and that is called the anterior retina, and what is between the disc and that line is posterior retina. So you have to say posterior pole and anteriorly. I think this is very important to understand. Yeah. So what sir is where the pointer sir has shown now, there is the anterior retina, and inside that is the posterior pole. This posterior pole and anterior retina, to get in your mind very clearly what we are referring to. Very anterior horseshoe tear. So you know it's very near the oris aorta. Can we go next slide, please? Krishnendu, can we go next slide, please?
Yes, this one you're talking about,
No,
or
next slide, next slide. Yes. I would like somebody here. I don't see any questions. No. Previous slide. That's a lovely slide. The one which shows 10 layers of the retina. Those postgraduates, I would like you to tell me when there's retinal detachment, where does it occur? Anybody wants to chat in the chat box right over there, and I'd be happy to read out your name and congratulate you. Which there are 10 layers over here, and these are ones you have to mug up before you go for the exam. This is a photo. All PGs have to know. This is a possible short question, DNB, whatever DO, whatever you're doing, MS, whatever you're doing. This is a very possible retina short question. What are the layers of the retina? So where does the retinal detachment actually occur? Dr. Krishnendu, can you show us the pointer, please? Dr. Krishnendu?
yes,
Can you show us the pointer? I have some answers. Very nice. Can you show those? Yeah, between the RP, universal retina rods and cones. Can you show with your, yes. Just move it across over there, please. Yeah. So Dr. Manvi Agarwal was the fastest finger first. Hello also. And Dr. Nisha Rungta. I think a lot of people answering. I love these people. Very nice. Very good. So people are clued on. People are paying attention what we are doing. So it's important to know what has happened. And if you can show your patient this photograph and tell them, bhai, tera ye se ye hat gaya. These two have layers are separated. That is your vision. Even if I put them back, you will never have same vision that you had before. This is very important to show the patients this. Now, can we go next slide, please? Dr. Satyet, is he around? Bhagya.
Yes, I'm here, right here.
When you want me to stop and move on to vitreous anatomy, please tell me. We'll be happily move along over there also.
I will do.
Yeah. Right. So this RPE layer, we as retina specialists, I very love this layer very much because it gives us a lot of nutrition to the retina. This is something we are very worried about the health of this retina. So I'm sorry, Krishan, though I will again trouble you. Can you go back to the previous? You had the previous layer. The previous slide, sorry, the previous not layer, the previous slide, yes. Now, I would like somebody here in the among the postgraduates to tell me, sir had shown a slide earlier, where when we have a patient of age-related macular degeneration, ARMD, of the wet type, which has bleeding on the retina, any idea between which layers it comes through, or the drusen that you see. What are drusen? Where the drusen that you see, the RP layer, where does it occur? The anterior layers, the posterior layers, inner layers, outer layers. Okay, we have fantastic. We have people coming in exactly. So Dr. Rajni, Dr. Anushri, Dr. Charul, and Dr. Hello. Hello is written as hello. Not name is not given. These are people who are listening very carefully, and I agree with them. Dr. Krishnendu, can I ask you, request you to please? Exactly, sir has gone there already. Beneath RP, that is exactly what we are referring to. So that's why I said the RP is very important for us retinal surgeons. If that is healthy, a lot of things will go on very well. So that's the place where you have ARM disease. Whereas, now I'll change my question. Outer also, Devashvita has put outer layers. Very nice. When we have a patient, as sir had mentioned this, in the circulation, blood supply to the retina, he mentioned over there. And he said dot and dot hemorrhages, flame shaped hemorrhages. Where do we get the flame shaped hemorrhages? If somebody is very careful to him, can you answer over there, the postgraduates? Where do we get the flame shaped hemorrhages? NFL, fantastic. Rajni, excellent. These people are very fast. Priyanka, Rupali, Anushri, all got it right. So this is where. Can you with excellent. Anjali, Kapil, all fine. Right. No, not autoplexum layer, Kapil. So no, not there. The flame shape is Krishnendu. Can you show with your your upper part, left side of your thing, that schematic diagram? I think though, if you all of you look over there, He has shown very nicely exactly the pointer is there. That correlates to the hemorrhages, V-shaped, flip-shaped hemorrhages. So when you see these, they go along. So I will now change my question to Dr. Satyajit, sir. Satyajit is there. Yeah. When you see a glaucoma patient very carefully and you teach us that look at the inferior notch and the disc and things, on the retina, what do you look for? The nerve fiber layer, what do you, sorry?
Complete your question.
Yeah. When you examine the glaucoma patient, you look for inferior notch and all your okay. So like I was saying, in glaucoma patients also, the nerve fiber layer is studied along because along the if it's very prominent, then it's a possibility of having glaucoma. Then these are the patients that you will survive with nothing. And RNF, oh exactly, oh excellent. Devashita has put wedge defect. Rajni has put NFL wedge defect. RNF, they've answered before I could ask my question also. So you're exactly. So it's important to know the anatomy very well because to correlate that with your clinical findings. Wanting to see patients only and not read your books, not understand the anatomy is not going to help because you need to understand exactly what is happening. When a patient has no NFL, has a large 0.9 disc, in that patient or a very advanced glaucoma, it is no use looking for the NFL defect. Can we move ahead, please, Krishnendu?
Which slide? Because I have moved ahead lot of slides.
No, I wanted to show the one where you were saying ERG.
ERG.
So Charul, Priyanka, Rupali, very nice. Thank you so much, Manvi. Yeah. Now, if we look at what his sir has shown us, he's the right. I will ask you to look at the right lower part of the slide, which says A, B, C, D waves over there. So a ERG helps you. It's like doing an ECG. You know, the leads tell you different things where the anterior ischemia, inferior wall ischemia. The ERG gives you an advice. You can sometimes, if you know how to read the ERG very well, studying ERG itself, you can then tell which layers of retina are diseased or affected in this particular disease. I will quickly ask Dr. Krishnendu, can you tell us where a VEP will help us, a visual equivocal potential, normal diseases?
Like if you have optic nerve pathology.
Optic nerve pathology. Is an ERG helpful in optic nerve pathologies?
Generally not. It's a purely retinal disease.
Purely retinal disease. Okay. So I have a question now. Can you give me some diagnosis where you would like to do an ERG, some name disease, any retinal diseases?
First disease is the retinitis pigmentosa.
Correct.
And
anything else?
Any congenital disease like choroidemia, thyroid atrophy, where you can get decreased signals like the fundus flavimaculatus. Here you can exclude the other pathology or confirm the disease.
Yeah. The reason I brought in these names right now is because when you clinically see these patients, it should be there at the back of your mind that I will ask for an ERG, but what you have seen clinically, you should be able to correlate to the ERG. The ERG is not very easy to interpret and people are trained in that, but keep in your mind that ERG can be done to test what cells are diseased if clinically you're not sure what is happening. Can we move ahead? There was a slide on the cystoid macular edema that is very commonly asked for the postgraduates. ERG, hello, has put in servo, CRV ischemic type, very nice. Drug toxicities, Abhishek has put very nice. RP, rod cone dystrophies, Abhishek has also put very nice. There's a schematic one you had put for cystoid macular edema. You had shown lovely why the oblique orientation. Okay. We stick to that slide. No. Can we? Okay. Next slide. A lot of lag over here. Yeah.
Which layer you want?
Sorry. I will just ask you, Krishnendu, why don't you just please explain to us again clinically cystoid macular edema, what we see, and anatomically what happens?
What we see is actually the fovea is a depressed area. It should not has any kind of fluid inside it. So what we see in a cystoid macular edema is a fluid collection inside the foveal area or the macular area. So in that area, why it happens? Because of which the Henle's layer, that is the oblique orientation of the photoreceptor action. So it is peripherally, it is oriented vertically, but here in the foveal area, it is oriented oblique. So that is why it is the space is there so that the fluid get accumulated over there. And there are a lot of other theories also available. This is only anatomical theory. Other theories like glymphatic pathways. Glymphatic pathways is a different from lymphatic pathways. Lymphatic pathways is the cause of the accumulation of fluid in the foveal area. So these are two main causes why the cystoid macular edema we found in the foveal area, not anywhere else.
So my question to the postgraduates is, we have a class later on, but on a fundus fluorescein angiography, if a patient has cystoid macular edema, my first question is, what is Irwin gas syndrome? Suppose if you can start typing, what is Irwin gas syndrome? Kapil's statement, CSR due to dilatation of outer layer of choroid and RP breach. I'm not able to understand what he means. Pseudophakic CME. Yes. Rupali and Babishika, correct. Kapil, I could not understand what you're writing over there. So in these patients, when you do a fluorescein angiography, you can actually see a petalloid appearance which follows those layers that he has shown over there. I think we'll move ahead. Cartwheel appearance, retina choroid. Can we go to your color vision slide? Pooja, is Dr. Pooja there? Can we have Dr. Pooja, please?
Yes, sir.
You have a large practice in Patna and you've been seeing for more than nearly 20 years, you're seeing retina patients. When you suspect a patient with a color vision abnormality, in Patna, in your clinic, what test do you do?
For color vision,
Yeah, for color vision, just color vision.
color vision, I'm not very sure.
No. Do you have the Ishara chart with you?
Yeah,
You
that
all
is
use the Ishara chart?
for
Yeah.
that is routine
That
chart.
is what we do.
That is what we do normally, but I don't know about any other specialized
Exactly.
test you're talking about.
Most of us, even though the textbooks tell us a lot of tests, most of us in retina practice have only the Ishara chart. The plates are there. You have a 16 plate that you can do. You can do 42 plates. You can interpret that. But most of us in retina practice will keep only the Ishara chart. There are others, and I will ask somebody, what is the FM 100U test? It's a Farnsworth Munsell 100U test, which has actually 99. It's like carom kind of buttons over there, and it's a gradation. It's a very difficult test. It is a lot of plotting to show the kind of, you have a red green, you have a blue yellow color dyschromatopsia that you have. So these are important tests that we do. Your lantern test, these guys in the railways do, but the Farnsworth Munsell 100U test is a very important test that we do. I will ask a question now. What drug toxicity? Okay, I think we move on to no. Let's just move on. Can we? Yeah. Can we move ahead, Krishnendu?
Ethambutol.
Ethambutol. Exactly. Somebody said that. Very important. Very nice. I didn't want to complicate things. Ethambutol was said. Manvi also put exactly. 2 people have put on ethambutol. Very nice. And it's very well put. Can we go back to your presentation, Krishnendu?
So the answer is ethambutol. When you are ethambutol poisoning, when you are suspecting a patient on ATT treatment on ethambutol, then color vision is mandatory. You have to do it before you send the patient away.
Yeah. Can we, Krishnendu, can we go back to your presentation, please?
So can I start the retinal degeneration or skip to the vitreous?
Retinal degeneration, how many slides are there?
There are a few slides because of it related to retina. So I just highlight this slide only.
Please
This
go
is
ahead.
the only
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
This is the most important slide. Where is the normal variation, the developmental abnormalities, and degeneration? Which is clinically insignificant and which is clinically significant, which is leading to retinal detachment. So this slide is the only important slide I like to show the postgraduate people. There's a normal variation. There's the enclosed oral bay, meridional fold. This is a normal variation. Developmental abnormalities like non-cystic retinal tuft, zonular tractional tuft, degeneration like peripheral cystoid degeneration, cobblestone, pars plana cyst. But the most important thing is the lattice degeneration. What is the most important degeneration in the retina, which leads to retinal detachment in most of our patients. And other degeneration cause retinal detachment, like sometimes degenerative retinoschisis, that is the reticular type, not always the typical one. So this is the important slide. And yes, sir.
Do we have any photos of this, Krishnan
Yes,
sir?
yes.
Can you just show us the photos, please?
You can see this is the meridional fold, how it looks like in the indirect ophthalmoscope. I'll show only the photos. Meridional complex. This is the enclosed oral bay. The enclosed oral bay enclose the part of the retina within the ora. Peripheral retinal excavation, small oval depression in the retina. So this is how you can distinguish the degenerative retinoschisis, typical one and reticular one. How does it look like? It look like peripheral area is elevated. You can see this is a schematic diagram and this is the actual photograph of the peripheral retinoschisis, degenerative one, the typical one, not the reticular one. And this is the distinguishing feature between the typical retinoschisis and the reticular retinoschisis. It's a splitting difference. Typical retinoschisis splitting occurs in the outer plexiform layer and reticular is a nerve fiber layer. The important is the reticular retinoschisis associated with the retinal detachment more often, and the typical one does not have retinal detachment associated with it. So this is the picture of the typical retinoschisis, not the reticular one.
Dr. Kapil has a question, sir. Why absolute scotoma occurs in retinoschisis? Dr. Krishnendu.
Because there is a splitting in the nerve fiber layer. If you can see, there's a splitting in the nerve fiber layer, typically seen in the reticular retinoschisis. So there's the obstruction in the visual path. That is cause of the absolute scotoma.
Yeah, that's very well illustrated, answered. Good question, good answer. We'll move ahead.
So these are another pictures, atrophic retinal hole. So if you can see, there's a hole, another degenerative part of the retinal periphery. Atrophic hole sometimes causes retinal detachment, and important thing is lattice degeneration. Most often we can see this lattice degeneration at the periphery. These are the actually obliterated blood vessels at the periphery, which leads to thin retina and the lattice degeneration. The lattice degeneration often encountered in 0.3 to 0.5% of the patient.
There is just one thing. There's a question from Dr. Charot. I request all postgraduates that if you go through the list of classes that we have classes on retinal detachment later on. So I will request all of you. I know you are very excited and you're seeing retina, but my request would be that please hold on to your questions for those particular days. Dr. Charul, I will note down your question and I will request you to come back on the class that day, and I will make sure that Dr. Rupak Biswas, my colleague, answers your specific question clinically, how to differentiate between serous and exudative RD. I think it's an excellent question. I can answer it right now, but let's hold on for now. Otherwise, we'll never get anywhere. We will answer your question on the day when the retinal detachment is there. I'll make sure he shows you how it's done. Thank you, Dr. Charul, for understanding. We'll go ahead, Dr. Nandi, please.
Then I'll go to the vitreous all the way.
Yes, sir.
So this is the vitreous anatomy. It's again development is the first, the primary vitreous, secondary vitreous, and tertiary vitreous.
Mr. Abel here. So this is video number 2 of the 6th week
Anybody else also
of
speaking?
learning. And
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we are here with the tertiary vitreous with us. So actually, the anatomy of the vitreous is inner, transparent, colorless, jelly-like hydrophilic gel. So it is bounded anteriorly by the lens and posteriorly by the retina. It is composed of 99% of water. Other parts is the collagen fiber, actually type 2, and the hyaluronic acid. It is actually, if you see the schematic diagram, this is the lens and this is the Berger space between the lens and the vitreous, and there's a thin area going from the lens to the disc. Actually, this is known as the Crockett canal, which actually is a remnant of the hyaloid vessels, which actually present at the fetus. So it divides in the cortical vitreous at the periphery. It is cortical vitreous, medullary vitreous at the middle, and hyaloid membrane. So anterior hyaloid membrane just behind the lens, and the posterior hyaloid membrane just in front of the retina. Their anterior hyaloid membrane has following connection: hyalociliary zonule, which is attached to the lens and the ciliary body, retrolental ligament, coronary ligament, and median ligament. These are all not true ligament. These are only attachment of the vitreous with the lens and surrounding tissue. Posterior hyaloid membrane is actually extend from the vitreous base up to the optic disc, is the posterior part of the vitreous. Cortical vitreous refers to the entire peripheral zone, 100 micron in width, represent only 2% of the vitreous volume, whereas the medullary vitreous is the center part of the vitreous, 98% of the volume. Now, there are a lot of tracts and zones which are clinically anatomically described. It's a tractus lenticular, retrolentalis and tractus periretinalis, actually behind the lens and before the retina. Zones: retrolental zones, intermediate zones, and preretinal zones. So it is the most important, clinically important, where it is firmly adherent to the structures, like it is firmly adherent to the ora serrata, which is known as the vitreous base. It is firmly adherent to the optic disc, back part of the lens, foveal region, and along the blood vessels. The strongest attachment to the pars plana and the retina in the region of the ora serrata, which is known as the vitreous base. So coming to the vitreous bed, is a 4 millimeter wide zone of the vitreous. It is attached firmly to the ora serrata. Here the collagen fibrils are get inserted to the internal limiting membrane, which is important. That is why it is firmly adherent. Clinical application is the vitrectomy, where we have to remove during the PVD. At the base of the vitreous, we cannot remove the vitreous completely. We have to shave the vitreous at the area of the vitreous base. So that is the end and clinical application. Thank you.
Pooja, Dr. Pooja.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Any tips, questions, any points you would like to make?
I think the vitreous attachments has its advantages and its disadvantages. So one of the disadvantages is that you have to understand that it's a medium to which abnormal vessels also, they like a creeper. It gets attached to these to this jelly-like thing, and that causes the lot of disturbance in the retina, like retinal detachment or the new blood vessels, which act as the vitreous acts as a scaffold. So that is the clinical importance of doing vitrectomy to relieve these kind of disorders and diabetic retinopathy or other kind of proliferative disorders.
No, Dr.
And
Pooja.
when we are talking of
No. So I'll just go back. What Dr. Pooja was referring to, that in a disease of PDR, proliferative retinopathy, when there are growth of these blood vessels grow, and the vitreous makes it difficult for us because it goes into the vitreous, and we end up having a fibroscular proliferation over there. And when the vitreous contracts, they can tear and cause vitreous hemorrhage for us. That's what Pooja you were referring
Yes,
to.
that's what I
assuming.
was trying to say. Yes, yes.
So I absolutely correctly, I will take it a little bit forward. Dr. Krishnendu, can we go back to your slide with the attachment slide, please? The strong adhesions. So one was what you talked about, disease of the retina, which gets complicated with the vitreous attachment to the retina, and I'll just go through. Dr. Kapil, you've mentioned, sir, Veiger ligament, Burger space, patella fossa. Yeah, anatomy wale. Yeah. I'll come back to your question, Kapil. And there was with us a question: how will we differentiate in retinal detachment and vitreous detachment? Very good. Yeah. So exactly what we will foveal region. We will talk about the foveal region. When there is a firm adhesion of the vitreous to foveal region, and can somebody among the postgraduates tell me if I have a severe foveal region contraction, and we discover the interlimiting membrane attachment also in the retina pathology, what can happen on the retina if I say vitreous is very strongly attached to the fovea and there is contraction there? What can we have? Fastest finger first. What disease can we end up with? Vitreomacular traction, wet macular roll. Exactly. These are Dr. Swami, Dr. Manvi Agarwal, Dr. Abhishek, Dr. Kapil. Excellent. This is what I was referring to. See, now that if you know an anatomy very well, and you know that the patient is having PVD, having a strong attachment, you can see some vitreous veils over there. Farmhouse, मैं समझा नहीं. Manisha Agarwal written farmhouse. I don't know what that means. Manisha Agarwal, is it our senior Manisha? Macular hole, yes. I think that is, she's on a phone, I think. That's why it says picked up a thing. Macular hole. I agree with all of you. So a strong addition of the vitreous phobia causes that. Also, what Dr. Pooja said, strong addition of the blood vessels. If there's abnormal blood vessel, if that gets pulled, you can have a vitreous hemorrhage over there. Can you go back, please, to your slide? That slide, Krishnandu.
And you can also, sir, elaborate on the lattice, the vitreous
Go ahead.
around the
Yourself,
lattice
go ahead.
degeneration and.
Very important. Please go ahead. You yourself. Pooja, please go ahead.
Yeah. So another important thing to understand is when we have lattice degeneration, what is going on over there? The vitreous is attaching itself to this weak area, and this is the part which is very vulnerable for detachment. So this clinically, then it also becomes important. So amongst the other vitreous attachments, the part where it's attached around the lattice degeneration is also important clinically.
Yeah, I think that's very, very important. So when you're looking at if a patient has come to you, what we discussed before we started the meeting, a Weiss ring, what is it? It's called a PVD. That is a detachment of the vitreous, which physiologically can happen, but can pathologically results to these particular diseases. Can we go back to your previous? Sorry. There is a question from Dr. Kapil which says, sir, how vitreomacular adhesion and vitreomacular traction form? Dr. Krishnendu, would you like to take that question, please? VMA and VMT, how do they form? Now, Dr. Krishnendu, I think you are muted.
Am I audible?
Yes, please.
Yeah, we have about
actually,
15 to 20
always...
minutes. Focus.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we always have vitreomacular adhesion. So it is a common thing. Vitreomacular adhesion is a normal thing. Actually, with the aging process, the vitreomacular adhesion get detached from the vitreous gets detached from the retina. So sometimes it get detached smoothly, sometimes it doesn't get detached smoothly. So what happens if you have traction? If it doesn't detach smoothly, it causes traction on the different part of the retina. It can be focal traction, it can be broad-based traction. So if you have focal traction, it is called focal vitreomacular traction. If it is broad-based traction, then it can give rise to broad-based vitreomacular traction. So VME is a normal thing. and there is a classification of DMA which can either give rise to vitreomacular traction, or it can give rise to epiretinal membrane formation, or it separates by its own. So these are the three arms of vitreomacular adhesion.
The EIM is formed of what, just pathologically?
ERM is actually the gliosis, is a glial tissue which overlies the area of the retina. Is actually the glial tissue.
So an ERM can form due to inflammation, chronic inflammation, cystoid edema, ERM can form, or it can form
Most
also
common is idiopathic.
idiopathic. Just happens that you have a thickening of the layers over there, the climatic changes. ERM can, the foveal contour can still be maintained on the OCT you see, and still you don't, or you can have an earlier stage which is called a celephone maculopathy, where the ERM looks very thin and you don't do anything about the vision is still maintained. There's no change, the patient has no distortion, and it's okay for the patient. And we had okay, requesting YouTube link. Shreyas requesting YouTube link to be shared. They have mentioned they will share after the recording this. They will share it later on. Any other? Can we go back to your previous slide, Krishnendu? Your previous slide, please.
General anatomy or next?
Anatomy. Is Dr. Satyajit there?
Yes, and I was just saying that we have 15 minutes for discussion.
We will leave you before that. We will let you have your tea immediately. I have a question to you. I have a question to you now. We have not bothered you up till now. You are doing a smooth, good phacosurgery, and you've done a good you've removed phacoemulsification done, and not you, I forget you. You don't have PC rents. I don't have PC rents. I don't do catastrophe also. So let's say a good friend of ours unfortunately has a PC rent. PC rent and vitreous just prolapse into the anterior chamber. When you see clinically, these are PG students, what do you see on your microscope when you see a PC rent and vitreous? What clinically, what do you see? Somebody said, I've never seen a PC rent. I've never seen vitreous prolapsing. What do you see clinically?
So clinically, there'll be a sudden deepening of the chamber, and the posterior capsule you can see as a tear and stretching of the capsule. Under the microscope, you can see it very nicely, but there is sudden deepening of the anterior chamber, and you know that the posterior capsule has ruptured.
Okay.
But you can see it very clearly, and the vitreous also comes out, and you can see the vitreous also.
And is it jelly-like?
Jelly-like, yes.
Jelly-like.
Jelly-like.
So
Yes.
the fluid in the anterior chamber is like water, and there is a little jelly-like. So what I'm trying to explain to somebody who is just a 3-month-old postgraduate, or somebody doing the first cataract surgery and unfortunately having a PC rent, they should look for this very carefully. They should have high magnification. When they suddenly see something, bubble, jelly, something, they know you should know you had a PC rent. And Dr. Pooja, any supposing I have a PC rent and I've put in the cell iode in the sulcus. From the retina point of view, anything you would like me to do post-operatively? Look for what? 1 month, 3 months later, I've had a bad PC rent, lots of vitreous layers. That's my surgery. Yeah.
That's a very good question. I think we have to see the status of the vitreous in the anterior chamber, and we have to see the status of the incision site, whether we have any vitreous incarcerated in the incision site, or we have any changes in the anterior chamber depth. So if there is any incarceration of the vitreous.
Sorry, Pooja, I'll just stop you. We had some excellent answers which said pupil peak sign, vitreous stands. Some please give the answers and I agree with them, which is what you are referring to. I must acknowledge them also. Please go ahead. I'm very sorry I stopped you.
So that's about it. I think we have to see the vitreous incarceration in the wound, and we have to rectify that. We have to take care of that. Otherwise, then what happens is that the vitreous gets disturbed, and simultaneously the retina surface also gets disturbed, and we can land in a lot of trouble. We can have the cystoid macular edema, phakic cystoid macular edema. We can have subsequent breaks in the retina. We can have an RD future in the later stages. So that is what we have to keep in mind. And subsequently, we have to see the posterior segment also, even after doing phaco. On subsequent visits, dilate the patient, see the posterior segment, look for signs of cystoid macular edema, and even do a peripheral examination.
I agree. There is sorry, Satyajit.
Practically, we put triamphicolone and we do angiovitrectomy and we put pilocarpine and dilate the pupil and we want to make sure that the pupil is absolutely round and there is no vitreous tag.
Yeah, I agree with what Pooja said. Be a retinal surgeon. We sometimes see these horrible things, very rarely. Nowadays, all of you cataract surgeons are very brilliant cataract surgeons. Because on table, you have to put in tricot, clean up the whole thing, put in a lens. Most of you do a very good job, but that's possible. One point that she meant very passingly, and I mentioned that again, even if you put in tricot, you put in lens beautifully, looks fine, round pupil, please make sure that you check the peripheral retina after a month or 6 weeks or 2 months, dilate it, depress, and see the far periphery, and see the patient every 2 months thereafter for at least 3 or 4 visits. Because even after 4 months, 5 months, the vitreous traction can cause a small horseshoe tear, which is very common in pseudophakics. Those of us who are retinal detachment surgery, it's been happened so long back, they don't realize it. But I know there's a large PC rent. You know, it was not a very smooth surgery, and they have a horseshoe to elsewhere. So I think it's very important to check a retina very carefully, because initial post-cataract surgery, you cannot depress. You have a section over there and things. So 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, as a dictum, let's check all retinas who had bad PC rents and bad vitreous losses to look for any peripheral lesions. We have an answer from Manisha Agarwal. Retina breaks to be ruled out. Absolutely correct. Fragments of cortex at the back. I agree with her wholeheartedly. She made two correct statements. Dr.
So,
Krishnendu,
in continuation, if I can interrupt, in continuation to
Please.
what you were saying, do you, as a retinal surgeon, recommend laser to all the lattice degenerations before a routine cataract surgery?
This is a very loaded question. It has a very varied answer. My personal practice, and I practice what I've done, what I was taught, and what I have taught at Shankar. All patients going for cataract surgery and LASIK surgery will have barrage laser to all lattices. You do the barrage laser, wait for at least 3 weeks to a month, see that your laser is fine, then do cataract surgery or LASIK surgery. For me, the answer is very clear. I don't want to get involved in any controversy regarding the chances of RD surgery, RD after lattice, treated, untreated. But this is the protocol I follow. Practically, I can speak for 2 hours of lattice degeneration and the pros and cons of barrage lattice and the barrage laser in these lattices. So let's not get into that part of it now. But yes, as a protocol, what do I practice? Barrage laser for all lattices, pre-cataract and pre-LASIK is what I practice. What about you?
I would agree with you. I think definitely barrage laser is required around lattices if you're going in for surgeries. Now with the era of phaco surgeries, I think the vitreous disturbance is very, very minimal, but still we have to keep that in mind. So especially for myopic patients or patients with other risk factors, which is beyond the scope of this topic, I think barrage laser is most of the times recommended.
There is a question from Dr. Charu, Dr. Krishnendu. The question from Dr. Charu is a very nice, interesting question. After what time scleral depression can be done after surgery? I will break that into 2 parts, Dr. Charu's question. Let's say it's a reasonably smooth surgery, maybe a small PC rent, hardly any vitreous loss. You can see it's your own patient. Or it's a very botched up surgery where you have to convert into an SICS, you have to put in sutures. Dr. Krishnendu, when are you comfortable to scale depression in both these scenarios?
In cases of uneventful surgery, I would rather perform scleral depression 1 month after surgery, not before that. In case of worst scenario, like eventful surgery, then if the visualization is good, if the corneal edema is not there, then also I'll perform the depression 1 month after surgery. The problem with the eventful surgery is the corneal edema. It's not the problem with the depression. It's the problem with the visualization. If you're able to visualize cleanly, then you go ahead with the depression 1 month following any surgery. So I would rather recommend you to go for depression not before 1 month, just after 1 month following surgery.
I will just complicate the situation, Dr. Charul, to answer your question. This is, I think, 2 or 3 years back at the ASRS, the American Society of Retinal Surgeons meeting, where they went into some retinal surgeon went, no, I do microphaco, I do phaconate, it's very small, I can interpret in 2 weeks. So I don't want to get into all that, but I agree with Dr. Nandi wholeheartedly. Let's keep a 1 month thumb rule. Let's not try and depress before that. Rarely you need to do anything before that. And anyway, the patient is very apprehensive, drops are going on. You've just given glasses. So a 1 month thumb rule would be a good idea to depress your patients. Dr. Naina has a question saying, sir, can the basis of PVR be explained, please? Naina, I can do that today, but I will leave it for the class on retinal detachment. I mentioned that before also. I would love to answer all your questions here today. It's Dr. Satyajit will not permit me. We'll end up with the night 12 o'clock. We will note your question down along with the executive RD and our reg RD difference, which somebody asked before also. I would request you that you ask this question back on RD day again, but I will note the question definitely, Naina. Thank you for asking the question, Dr. Naina. Dr. Satyajit, anything else or shall we close for the day?
Dr. Nandi, you have to show any more slides, or are you done with it?
No, I have finished.
Thank you. He showed thank you slide.
I finished.
I didn't see this. Okay, so that was a very, very interesting discussion today. Close your sound. Take it. And the discussion was made very, very interesting by Dr. Saurabh Sinha. Dr. Krishnanandi, you made a very nice presentation. Thank you so much for today, and we are looking forward to seeing your next presentation, which is on another date. Tomorrow, I would like to thank you so much. Tomorrow we have a very interesting presentation by Dr. Pooja Sinha, in which she will talk about how to do indirect ophthalmoscopy, and Dr. Saurabh will be discussing with her the different aspects of indirect ophthalmoscopy. My email ID is EYE, that is Sinha, SINHA @gmail.com. And all of you who want a YouTube recording that you had asked earlier for, you can write to me at eyesinha@gmail.com, and I will send you the recordings as we have sent of the previous classes on Squint of last week to different people who had asked us. We have this entire week of talks on retina, and then again 1 week we have on glaucoma, and then again we will have on retina. We just did that to break the monotony of the retina classes going on. Dr. Saurabh Sinha will be with us every day in the evening.
I have 2 points to make. I'm sorry I'm disturbing you. One,
go ahead.
Retina cannot be monotonous. I disagree with you. Retina is such an interesting subject. I promise you it can't get monotonous. And second, I must thank Krishnendu, because believe me, all retinal surgeons have all talks ready. BRVO, RD, anything. But nobody has an anatomy talk ready. So I know Krishnendu made this for us only. I must sincerely thank him for this. At any time you tell me end of ophthalmitis, RD, I have everything ready. But thank you so much, Krishnendu, for doing such a fantastic job. My gratitude to you, please.
Thank you so much. I would like to thank Dr. Pooja Sinha also. And importantly, I would like to thank Intas Pharmaceuticals for bringing this all together. I'd like to request all of you to see what are the topics which are coming in the following weeks. And you can have your questions with us. Dr. Saurabh Sinha, who was a consultant at Shankar Nethralaya, he's a great teacher. He has a great idea of teaching. and he will be with us in the evenings every day. Please feel free to ask your questions to him and discuss different aspects. Thank you so much once again to everybody, especially the participants who were here for the last 1.5 hours. Thank you so much.